and we are doing an interview
Okay.
with Bonnie McBride
Yes.
and Brian Salisbury.
Salisbury. Mm-hmm.
Salisbury, okay. And Bonnie lived in Crown King. And what
Yes.
years did you live there?
1942 to 1950.
1942 to 1950.
Yeah, it was spring of 42 when we moved in.
Spring of 42.
Yeah.
So how
And
old would you have been then?
I think I was about 5.5,
Okay.
around there, around between 4 and 5. I was small. And we came up, my dad had been up before, Harris Salisbury. Everybody'd know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's name was Bernita, and so Harris and Bernita Salisbury. And when we came, Dad had been up before to investigate some things up here about the mines. And then he brought us up, and we had a 1938 Ford Coupe, a little one. And we came up in the spring. We got caught in the snowstorm. We couldn't get into town. So the car was stuck. We couldn't get any further. Dad hiked in by himself. Mom and I stayed in the car. And he came in and he got 2 guys, maybe 3. One was Tony Bennett, and I can't remember the other ones. But Tony carried me in a gunny sack all the way into camp, and I don't know how many miles it was, through the snow. My mother wore Tony's big size 14 galoshes, and she had a loose cartilage in her knee, and so it would pop out with every step.
Oh, that poor thing.
But we made it to camp. We came over. The old trestle was still there when we moved here.
Wow.
Through the gap, and right across from the trestle we moved in to like the bottom of the big white house there.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved into the bottom. There'd been some soldiers in there, and they'd been in there the week before. I don't know why they were here, but they had left apparently a couple days before we came in, and they left some World War I blankets there, and we slept on those blankets that first night in the storm, and we ate out of canned things that Mom had managed to scrounge out of the car and bring in.
Oh, bless her. That had to be pretty tough for her.
It was very tough for my mom, who was a city girl.
Yeah. I'm surprised she didn't pack up and say, no, no, no.
I'm surprised she didn't too. She was a singer and a dancer and played piano. She was a writer, very talented.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And my father, Harris, he came here, and took him a long time, but he brought in telephone line in all the way up through the gap, and he opened up a mine, and I'm thinking it was the Crown King mine. Some people think it might have been the Gladiator mine. I can't remember, but I used to help him when I was a little tiny kid. I would go up with him up to the mines, and we would go down the old ancient ladders into the shafts, and then I would hold the end of the measuring tape. He had a surveyor's tape, and I'd hold the end, and he would go off into drifts and measure the drifts down in the shaft.
Wow.
I was a little tiny thing.
You probably weren't afraid either.
No, I wasn't afraid. I would be now. I'd be terrified.
We'd be terrified now.
And so, anyway, he opened up the mine, and he got a hoist going with, it wasn't a real cage, but people kind of held on to the cables or something going down. And they opened up the mine. He built a mill up there. He brought in part of the mill from someplace else. I don't remember, but he opened it up, and it was called a cyanide flotation process.
Okay.
And I remember I spent a lot of time at the mill, He also built a boarding house. My mom was a cook, Bernita Salisbury, for a little while. And then when Brian was born, my famous brother, we hired a gal from Ireland. Her name was Edna, and I don't remember her last name. A redhead from Ireland.
Huh.
And she became the cook up at the boarding house, at the bunkhouse. And then she also took care of Brian. My mother was a writer, and so she was always occupied, and she was an artist.
Oh, for heaven's
And so
sakes.
Edna was a big help to us. And I went to school in the little schoolhouse, which was then white. And Mrs. Ailey was one of my teachers. She was over 80 years old when she came up here. And I can't remember the others. One named Barbara something. She was a big, tall redhead. And I wasn't very nice. I called her Mrs. Red Horse Face.
Sounds about right, doesn't it?
I was kind of a brat. But Mrs. Haley is the one who sat me down and gave me a talking to and said, "Your parents are very bright people, and you can be too, and you're going to grow up," and I was about 7 then, and she said, "and you will go to the university and get a degree." And of course I didn't know what a university was or even what a degree was, but I have done that since. So
She was right.
she was right. And my brother is a famous musician now, so you got to interview him.
Uh-huh. Another musician.
Another musician, yes. He's very famous. He can tell you what he does.
Yes.
And when you're ready for that. And going back to where we were, I'm trying to think. I went to the little one-room school, and I taught my brother how to read when he was 2 1/2 of the Dick and Jane books, because it was 1st to 8th grade. And so I would listen to whatever the teachers were teaching, and then I would go home and try to teach him. You know, and he was smarter than me, so.
Well, he had a good teacher, I'd say. Huh?
We had a good teacher, and I just remember a lot of the games we played out on the playground, and kick the can, and Red Rover. There was a little building at the end of the playground where we'd toss the ball back and forth. And my good friends, I think my closest friend was Eldridge Moore, but we called him Buzzy. And he had a sister named Carolyn that I looked up to, and she was a pretty redhead, and I thought she was a real big girl.
Yeah.
But I was real little, and she turned out to be real little, and I turned out to be real big.
Amazing how that happens.
So
funny.
I knew the Rices. There was Carol Rice and Jimmy Rice, and I was trying to think, and of course I knew Tony Nelson. He was 2 years younger than me,
Okay.
and so we got to visit and remembered some good things.
That is really very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, he did tell a story. Tony told me a story about you with the teeth.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay. Well, I got what my dad wanted. They said, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "Well, I want a football." Well, they didn't really believe me, but they did get me a football. And so I took the football to school, and of course I was really popular because I owned a football. and so the boys said, "Well, just give that to us and we'll play." And I said, "Well, I want to play too." And they said, "No, you're a girl. You can't play." And I said, "Well, I own the football. You have to let me play." And so they let me play. And of course, you know, we didn't have any helmets or anything in those days. And so we were playing tackle, of course, and we were pretty rough. So I asked Tony what the kid's name was, who was opposite me, and we were coming together, you know, on the line. And what did he say his name?
So it's Bobby.
Sweet Scott. Bobby Scott, I think. I remember the kid, but I didn't remember his name.
Right.
But
right.
we crashed together, and his two front teeth, right there in my head.
Ouch.
He lost his two front teeth in my head,
When he
in my
lost-
skull.
Oh,
And
that
so
sure hurt.
this
Not
was,
sure which worse.
I don't remember the pain. He probably had it worse than I did. But this happened to be the day that Brian was born in Prescott. So Mom was in the hospital in Prescott.
I know.
And so my dad, the teacher, whoever our teacher was at that time, bandaged both of us up. We were trying to hold his mouth shut with all kinds of whatever we stuffed in there to stop the bleeding. And so Dad took us in town in our old rattle trap car, whatever it was, into Prescott, into the hospital, and they took his teeth out of my head. And I don't know what they did with him. You know, how they fixed his mouth.
Exactly.
But of course I got stitched up, and then I went to see my mother, and I had this big bandage all around my head. And my mother said to my dad, "Harris, what are you doing with this girl? You're supposed to be taking care of her while I'm here in the hospital."
Oh no.
And here it happened at school.
Oh,
So that's the story on that.
that's funny. Well, you were tough and you were going to play that football.
Yes. I don't know. I thought I was tough, but I was kind of a stringy little thing.
Well, you had the wherewithal to fight and do it.
Yeah. Well, you know, part of my background was that before we'd come, I'd been born in Leadville, Colorado. We'd lived in Kokomo and Climax. And before we came, I had gotten rheumatic fever. And I'd been taken down to the hospital in Denver. And so while I was in Denver and recuperating down there, I'd gotten the measles, which had caused the rheumatic fever. And so I was there, I don't know how long I was in the hospital, quite a while. But when they released me, they told my parents that they had to get me down out of the high altitude to where we were living, that we were living at 14,000 feet.
Right.
So we came down to Crown King. They moved here because of me, basically. And Dad got started in the mining here, and that's how I came here.
So did he mine in Denver? Is that how he was already into
He's always been a miner. He graduated from the School of Mines in South Dakota. And my father has since become famous. He was famous before he died. He went back to school. He got many degrees. He taught metallurgy at the University of Utah. They gave him a whole building to put a lab up where he perfected an invention that he'd made in the 20s, and it's called a char and pulp process for taking the gold out of tailings that had been thrown away. And it was a leach process.
Okay.
But he had perfected this out in the 20s in the Death Valley, where he'd gone out there with a donkey in a tent.
Oh, wow.
And had created this system because he knew it would work. He'd been reading the old Greek things on mining, and it worked, but many years went by because he had to support the family. And so he perfected, at the University of Utah, he perfected the design, and from that, they used his design at Homestake. They put the prototype at Homestake, South Dakota. Well, it worked. So now they're using his system in the Gold Coast in Africa. They
Really?
have been for years and years. So this was a government project. That's where the funding came from. So he wrote a book, and he became famous within his own lifetime. And unfortunately, my mother didn't live long enough to see his fame. she died at 62 years of age with Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, she was young.
She was too young,
Yeah,
yeah. But
that's terrible.
she could have been famous in her own right, you know, if I could have saved her writings. So we're going to try to reconstruct them.
That's so heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking. My daughter, who was in Connecticut, was rewriting Mother's writings, and I have a little bit of them,
Right.
but they're not exactly the same, of course, because my daughter only knew my mother when she was 4 years of age.
Right.
So, you know,
Okay.
but when she was an adult, she tried to reconstruct her writings.
Right.
And so I do have a few of those.
Well, that's
You know,
something.
and I
at
have a
least.
lot of pictures from growing up here, so I will get copies for you from those. I just have one. I don't have the negatives, I don't think. I do have a box of negatives, but I don't think I have those. But
Right. Well,
if I
that'd be
do-
wonderful if
yeah,
you can have copies made or whatever. That would be greatly appreciated.
okay. Well, I have them I have all us school kids on a teeter-totter. You know, I have pictures of the school and pictures of us being in a play, you know, like Thanksgiving Day with pilgrim costumes on. And if I can remember the names of the kids, it's hard. They were Fundum kids. That was their name. And
Bill Fundum
Bill Fundum.
wrote to us several years. We haven't heard from him in many years, but I can't remember. But he did have some stories about the school. And I'm trying to think of who it was. I'll think on it. You keep talking there. But
Well,
yes.
I'm just trying to remember the kids too, and I'll probably, you know, Buzzy and Carolyn, and I think there was a smaller one too, but I didn't know her so well. Edith, I think, I'm not sure. And there were a lot of kids that I would try to remember. There was Larry somebody. There were two brothers. Van Lanningham was their name. And I do have some old movie pictures Dad took on V8, I think.
Oh.
But they've been converted. The V8 tapes are lost, and they were converted to VHS
Okay.
tapes, and I don't have a player. But I had seen them once. The quality's terrible now. It was pretty good then. He used to have it on a projector, you know.
Right.
So we've got quite a few. There were quite a few reels from here.
Really?
Yeah.
You
And
know, we at the school, we were able to convert a lot of the old Christmas play VHS tapes and put them on CDs.
that's what we're trying to do.
And, you know, if you send us one, we could try it for you and see if we can put it on a CD for you.
I can probably do that too, where my daughter lives in Longview, and I can't where I live. I have not even access to the computer. I can't get it where I live. I'm in a little tiny logging town.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
And
That's-
I can't get the satellite. The mountain cuts off the satellite. So,
yeah, unfortunately. We've just gotten our stuff here not too long ago.
okay.
So I know. But
Yeah.
Sue, the librarian here, she's our archivist for the
Okay.
Historical Society, and she's very good with all of that. And I leave all of that to her.
Okay.
But I will give you our mailing address.
Oh, good.
And then if you want to send us one, we can try it for you and see. And then maybe we could keep one CD and send you a CD
That
and
would be
your
nice.
original.
That would be nice. Yeah, well, we can
We'll try one
figure
and see how
something
it
out.
works.
Yeah. There's got to be some help somewhere. So, yeah,
That would be
to
great.
get that.
So when you were in school there, did they have the Christmas plays?
We did.
You did
Oh,
then?
yes.
They've
Oh,
been
yes.
around forever.
We saluted the flag. We did the Christmas plays. You know, yes.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, we had a little summer school sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, but,
Right.
and they would bring a movie up in the summer. Somebody would bring a movie up with a portable screen, and it was 5 cents to see, and usually an old Western, you know.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So,
Well, we had
And
kind of a
I
theater.
usually didn't have the 5 cents, and say, I don't have 5 cents. And they'd say, that's okay, you can watch it anyway, bring it next time. So I'd say to Mom, I need 2 nickels because I didn't pay last time.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, but we went through hard times, of course. Dad needed money, he needed backers for the mine, and there were times that we used up all our money. And I remember that's when my father knew Barry Goldwater, who was something director of the Mining Bureau, I believe. I think he was federal, but
He might have been.
I don't remember what he was because I was a kid.
Right.
I was about 7, maybe 6 or 7, and we
Right.
used to make many trips down to Phoenix to go out to Barry Goldwater's house where Dad would talk to him. And I didn't think they permitted me in the house, and I would try to climb the date palms, and because those dates looked pretty good, but I couldn't. And then I'd play in the rocks in Barry Goldwater's driveway,
Oh, for
and
heaven's
play in the
sake.
stream that went into the Salt River, and I'd play around. But anyway, the point was that Barry Goldwater put my dad in connection to someone called Silas P. Silverman in New York, who was the backer for the mine. And so he moved out here. We were living in the big house at the time, in the big white house. And when they came out, he brought his wife Lucille and 3 of their maids.
Huh,
And
really?
yes, really. And we moved then from the big white house to the one to the left, as you're going down the road, to the tin house.
Yep.
And that's where Brian was raised, in that tin house. And we took some pictures of it today. It's all different. But Dad brought in, it had an outhouse in the back, and he brought in indoor plumbing. He brought in a clawfoot tub in that house.
Okay.
And it had a mine in the back of it. It had a carport that we could put 2 cars in, and then it had rafters up above in the carport, and we stored our library there in whiskey barrels
Huh.
up there. But I would climb up into those rafters and read books. But behind that was a mine, a mine tunnel. And you could go in there, and Dad built shelves where Mom would put she would can things, bottle things,
Right.
and put her bottled things on the shelves, and Dad rigged up a hook to hang meat on. So if we'd get meat, we'd hang it in there in the mine tunnel that was right behind the house, right attached to the house.
Yeah, and that kept it.
Yeah, and so it's different today that it used to have stairs that went down from the house to the street. And we parked the car down at the bottom. And sometimes the snow was so deep one year, I don't remember which year, but it was so deep that it covered the car completely. And
That's something.
I do have pictures of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I have pictures of the deep snow up there.
Oh, for heaven's
So,
sakes.
and Brian's crib was there was a little veranda out there, and we kept his crib out there in the nice weather, and that's where he was.
Right.
Yeah.
That's-
So,
That's fascinating. It's kind of funny because the tub, I believe it was still there last time I was in the house. There's a family up here. I was going to ask you if you knew them. Their mother owned the store, the general store. It was in that time period. And it would be their grandmother, Ethel Morris.
well, that sounds familiar. I was a kid, and I just remember about the store that there used to be a hitching post there. When
Yes,
we
was
moved
there?
up, there was a hitching post. And when we moved up, some cowboy let me ride his paint horse out there. My folks were practically hysterical because he'd ask me, "Can you ride?" And I said, "Of course I can ride." And he gave me his horse to ride, and I was 4.5 years old, and the horse was very placid and just walked around.
Good thing.
Anyway, but I remember going into the store, and as soon as you go in there, there was a counter there, right as soon as you entered the store.
Yep.
And they used to have bronze horses in there, and he had a punch board, and you could, enter, you'd pay 25 cents to use the punch board, and you'd punch out a number, and if you won, you could win one of those bronze horses.
Oh.
And so we'd play it every payday. We'd play it, and so on special birthdays, my folks would buy one of those little bronze horses for me, and I had a whole collection of the horses that I would put on my dresser.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. That is funny.
Yeah, it seemed to me that the post office was off on the right side. It seemed different to me as I am recalling it, but yeah, we used the post office all the time, of course. And of course, there were rock slides often, and the boulders that came down were as big as a house, would cover the road. But I was telling Brian, I said, when we had these rock slides, there was no way to get groceries in, there was no way to get mail in, because I don't think there was any other way out of camp in those years.
Right.
I don't think there was, and now there's roads all over. But I remember I was telling him that someone from here would ride a mule into the rock slide. They would bring the mail up from Phoenix or Prescott, wherever that came from, as far as they could get. And then the person on the mule would tether the mule, and the both of them would climb over the rock slide to deliver the mail, to bring it in here.
Through sleet, snow, and whatever.
The mail came, and we brought our
sakes.
groceries in about once a year. That's how it was.
Oh, wow.
We'd go clear to Phoenix, because we'd go to Phoenix to go to see Barry Goldwater and to go to the state fair, and we'd get groceries.
Isn't that something?
We'd follow the trucks out that had vegetables on them, and they would fall off the trucks, and we would stop at the side of the road, pick up carrots and onions and tomatoes.
It worked out well.
We weren't going to waste anything. We knew better. And we ate a lot of jerky, which I stole. This is now on tape. There was, I'm trying to think of who, Lawton Champy, I think was his name, who had a ranch up here, and it was right behind the school. And I had a buddy, it may have been Tony, I don't know, one of these guys was my buddy, and I'm sure I was the ringleader. So we would go on our bellies down across the creek from where the end of the playground, and then behind that little house, we would go on our bellies through the creek, up through the willows, and get into his stables. And inside the stables, he had gunny sacks hanging there. Well, these gunny sacks were full of jerky. I mean, what kid can resist that?
Oh,
so we would fill our pockets with jerky. And then we'd chip off a little of the salt block, too, that he had in there. We'd carry those salt blocks around in our pockets.
Oh,
a little tiny chip them off. So we'd wait till the coast was clear and go get a piece of jerky. So I may be put in jail today. Let's see.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I think you ought to interview Brian.
Oh, I will.
Okay.
But, so now, Barry Goldwater, when you were there, what did you think of him as a kid?
Well, I was a kid, and first of all, he wouldn't let me in his house, so that wasn't a pretty good sign.
He was.
But he had a big department store in Phoenix. It was called Goldwater's.
Right.
And I don't know, to me it was huge. And I'd never been in a big place anyway. So to me it was gigantic. Well, Dad would sometimes meet him there, up in the office. There was an office upstairs. And if he couldn't get away, Dad was up there, and he'd tell me, he said, just be good. When I'm through, I'll come get you, and you just sit right there. Ha. Well, in there, in the store, they had a plaster of Paris Palomino horse.
Oh.
Big one, full size, with a saddle on it.
Oh.
And of course, I was horse crazy, and I climbed up on that plaster of Paris horse and course, the clerks went nuts, you know, and so I wouldn't get off. I'd squirm around on it, and then they were afraid I was going to break it, and I'd scurry around. I'd jump off the horse. I'd go underneath the clothes. I'd hide under the clothing racks. I was driving everybody crazy. They took me up to the office, you know, and they told my dad, "You can't leave this girl alone." And so the next time we went to Phoenix, I was invited into Barry Goldwater's house, and I was watched. Somebody watched me. Somebody played with me.
Did you have a guard?
I had a guard. So, I don't know. I thought he was all right, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
Dad liked him. And of course, you know, we were all Republicans in those days. So,
Of course, of course. Oh, that's funny.
so that's what I just can't tell you. I was a kid, you know.
You were having fun.
I was having fun, playing with the rocks. Always still playing with the rocks. You know?
And it reminds me of my youngest daughter.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
what was the name of the book your dad wrote?
Well, it was called, I'll have to photograph that and send you. It's like, it's a silver color. It was produced by the government.
Uh-huh.
He wrote it, but the government gets credit, you know, for it. But his name's in it. And it's got a silver color, and it has like AU, I think, on it.
Okay.
Is that the symbol for gold?
Yep.
Okay, it has that. I still have the book.
Okay.
I have it.
Well,
And
that's neat.
people have tried to take it from me many times.
No, hang on to that. That's special.
Yes, it's special.
That's right. That's right.
But I will find that out, right? Because there's some way you can get it. Since it was published through the government, I'm sure there's a way by the Mining Bureau to get it. You know, it would be on record somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It'd be neat for us to have a copy of
Yeah.
that. And yeah.
That would be nice. And he wrote many things because he had so many degrees. He was also a map maker for the Anasazi Indian ruins.
Okay.
And he did that for the university too. And he went on all the digs. So he was very interested in all of the native culture and traveled all around the state documenting, you know, ancient practice that he could get and trying to figure out the ancient origins of things. No, so
Sounds like he's a pretty brilliant man.
He was brilliant, yeah, he was. Yeah, he was famous. He was very quiet, very soft-spoken.
He was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, it always amazes me how many actually very brilliant people have lived here and gone on from here, but have done remarkable things.
Yes.
And from this tiny little place.
From this tiny place, that's
Uh-huh.
true. Well, he'd gotten his degree at the School of Mines in South Dakota.
Okay.
And then he married my mother, who had a degree in nursing, but she said the way they met was in Carthage, South Dakota, because the school of nursing girls were absolutely forbidden to have anything to do with the School of Mines boys. So, of course, that's what happened. They went to a dance and they fell in love.
Took care of that.
So we're here because of that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yes, so you had the Christmas plays. I know there was 2 outhouses there, weren't
Yes, yes. The girls' one was right across from the school, and there's a big rock in back of it.
there? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And it's fenced off now, but I was pointing over there to where it was, and I don't know where the boys' one was. I wasn't that naughty. So,
No. I know. We did get a letter from somebody that said his little job. He had a job he did there, $1 a week or something, and one of them was every day liming the outhouses
yeah.
and sawdust on the floor.
Sawdust on the floor, that's right. It
Did
was
you have
just tiny.
sawdust on the floor?
I don't remember. I
Yeah.
just thought it was dirt, but
Yeah.
I just don't remember that.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
our trail went just up to my house, went to the right of that outhouse. It was kind of a little Y, and
Okay.
that's fenced off too now, but their trails took off there at an angle from the schoolhouse, went right into the woods, and I went right down to my house where we lived in the tin house.
Right.
You know, the little trail. And it was really interesting to me, that trail, because there were wild pheasants and there were wild turkeys along that trail. Many times I saw wild turkeys.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sakes.
and there was a Y in the trail. I usually took the side to the left that went to the school. But there was a split in the trail that went to the right. And if you went up that, there was a beautiful little kind of canyon, like just enchanted little canyon.
Huh.
And at the end of it was a whole bunch, there was an outcropping of slate. And it was all sectioned off so that you could just peel off a section of slate, which
Okay.
we would do and take to school because we could write on it with chalk.
Huh?
So that was kind of a discovery.
I guess so.
And the person that showed me where that was Carol or Carolyn Moore.
Okay.
Yeah, she had showed me where it was because I kind of looked up to her. She was my inspiration. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
It's
so-
too bad you couldn't have been here for a centennial of the
I
school.
know.
Carolyn wasn't here, and I'm trying to, I cannot remember what
Well, she would have been older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
A
the
little
younger, one of the younger sisters, Arlen,
Arlen, I don't know. I don't remember her, but
she was here, and she has some funny stories too. I
Okay.
think that school had their hands full.
she probably knew me.
And
because
Buzzy went also.
Buzzy and I were really close.
Okay.
We were buddies. And his little house, they lived right where the bridge is where you come in to go to the general store.
Yep.
Their house was just to the left, just before the bridge. There was an old bridge then.
Right.
But their little house, they lived right there on that it's a little vacant spot there now, but that's where their house was. And Buzzy and I used to go down to the creek and play, and he fell off that bridge. He fell off and he landed right on his chest, which knocked the wind out of him.
Oh yeah.
And I went down there and I thought I'd killed him.
Oh.
I thought I'd killed him. I thought, oh my gosh, I killed my best friend. And of course he couldn't talk because he couldn't breathe because he knocked the wind out of him. But right beneath that place we dug a hole in the ground, probably about as big as this table. We dug this big hole, and then we took willow branches, and we took willow branches and pine branches, and we put those over the hole. And then we put leaves on top of that. We had our little hideaway, and we would scoot down in there, right along the ground. In the ground, we'd scoot into that thing in the ground under there. That was our secret cave.
Oh wow.
They said nobody could find us there.
I guess not.
I was telling Brian, just at the end of the driveway that goes up to the tin house, that's Hampton now, or something.
Oh yeah, Harrington House.
Harrington, okay,
Mhm.
just there was a flat space there. And at this end towards the town was a giant acorn tree. And I would get acorns to catch the donkeys because they had let the donkeys and the mules and the hinnies and they used to pull the ore carts out, the ore
Right.
cars out, and they'd let them all loose. But if I got a handful of acorns, I could catch one and ride it for the day.
Oh.
And I had a belt, and I would wear a belt, and then when I was feeding them the acorns, I'd slip my belt off and then slip my belt around the neck of the donkey, and I had a donkey for the day.
Oh, for heaven's
And
sake.
then somebody at the mill who worked for my dad, and I don't remember his name, went to Phoenix, played a poker game, won a racehorse. We brought that racehorse up here to Crown King, and he couldn't afford to feed it, and so he let it roam, and it joined the donkeys band, and
Oh, for heaven's
I
sake.
caught it. One day I caught it. And I took it home and I said, can I have this horse? And Dad said, we can't afford it either. But they would everybody would pitch in money, and we'd get one bale at a time and bring it all the way up from Prescott or someplace. And I didn't corral it, but it would come to get the hay. And otherwise it grazed with the donkeys. But I rode that horse for a couple of years, and I have pictures of that horse. It was an Appaloosa.
Oh, that's so neat.
So, yeah.
For heaven's
And
sakes.
I was sitting on that horse at the tin house, right in the yard of the tin house, when the World War II ended. And the way that I found out, I was sitting there on the horse, and my father came running out of the house. He had one of those T-shirts on, those white undershirts.
Yep.
And my mother was running after him, and she grabbed that thing, and she tore it off from him. And I thought, what's going on? I'd never seen them be hyped up like that. And they were screaming and yelling, the war is over, the war is over.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
And that's my memory of that.
How exciting.
You know, we would sit every night. We had a big old Victoria radio, and we'd sit with our ear to that every night to hear the war news.
Okay.
So it was an exciting time.
It was an exciting time.
Yeah.
That would have been your entertainment in the evening.
Oh, yes.
To listen to the...
Oh, we didn't say a word as kids. We didn't say a word because when that news came on. And it was hard to hear, you know. But Dad taught me how to build a little transistor radio with a stick and copper, just wrapping copper around the stick.
It's a kind of a crystal.
A little crystal radio.
Okay,
And
okay.
I could take it up in the mountains, and I could point it different ways, and I could get a signal and actually hear some music from someplace.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. How neat is that? I wouldn't know how to do that.
So, I don't know, there's probably a lot of stories, but, you know,
It was probably a much quieter time here.
well, I don't know.
What do you think? Well, maybe not.
I worked in the tavern, by the way, in the saloon.
Oh, you did?
I worked for Tom Anderson.
Oh,
I
you have
was
to tell us about that.
7 years old, and I washed beer mugs. And I got 5 cents for washing beer mugs
Okay.
until my mother found out.
Oh,
She put a stop to that.
took care of that.
But Brian has a funny story to tell you about Betty.
Okay, you're going to have to tell us.
You have to tell us, Brian. That'll be the one. He remembers it better than I do.
It's funny because a lot of people, when they talk about Tom Anderson, they'll say, oh, we used to run the other way when we saw him. They were afraid of him.
I sat on his lap.
You weren't afraid of
I
him?
was not afraid at all with him. He had his big staff, he had this big beard, and I'd sit on his lap.
Oh, for
In those days, girls could do that.
Yeah.
And he said, you be a good girl now and wash those mugs, and I'll give you 5 cents. Then I was telling Tony that I used to help, I can't remember what the guy's name was. It was Van Tilburg,
Uh-huh.
near the school, up in back of the school. He had a little cabin off to the left. You could walk there from the school.
Glenn,
Glenn, maybe?
Glenn and Elsie?
Well,
Glenn?
it was just, I don't know if he was married or not. He was old man. He was,
Yeah.
I think he was in his 90s.
Okay.
And I might have been 7 or 8. And I would help him collect wood. And he had some kind of a little thing, a cart thing, that he would be able to carry this wood up to his house.
Okay.
And he would offer to pay me, and I wouldn't take any money from him. I said, no. I said, I came here to help you. I said, I don't want any money. You know,
For heaven's sakes.
what would I do with it anyway? You know, go to the movie, I guess. They came the next summer.
Go to the movie.
Yeah, I think I did spend some money at the general store because I remember the big treat if we had some money from something that we would go and buy the big Hershey's bar, was probably 5 cents, and we would take it in back of the store. And Carol Rice and I would sit down in back of the store and we'd break up this chocolate bar and eat that chocolate bar. It was the biggest treat we'd ever had, you know. But her mom, I don't know if you knew the Rices, but her mom would make panucci.
Oh,
And so we would go over there after school because we'd get that panucci from her.
good stuff.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Yeah. So I probably have a lot of memories, but I can't remember them right now.
I think you've done pretty
Well,
good.
thanks.
She's really good with names.
I don't know. I probably know a lot more if they'll come to me, when I get home and think about it.
I know.
And if I look at the pictures again. And
How about holidays, Christmas? What was Christmas like here?
Christmas here, let's see. We always did spend Christmas here. We always got our own tree. We made a family thing of Christmas. We went out and always chopped our own tree. We always packed a lunch. Mom packed a good lunch. We all went. Mom came, the baby went, everybody came for Christmas. We'd come home, and of course there wasn't much money, so we had cranberries and we had popcorn, and we'd decorate the tree with that. Tinsel, we had tinsel. We'd have a lot of fun, and they were very lenient, so we could throw it at the tree. There wasn't any,
You didn't have to hang it?
We didn't have to, they didn't care. But I was very jealous of my brother. I was a bad sibling because he got an electric train for Christmas, and I wanted it. And I got a doll, and I didn't want a doll.
There you go. That's what they did in those days,
That's
didn't
what they did in those days.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so my kids kind of get a kick out of that, But we didn't have much money. I remember we did have something that I really enjoyed with that driveway that went up there to that house. They had gotten me, actually they got it for Brian, but I used it. It was a tiny little Tonka toy truck, a steam shovel that had a little bin on it that you could scoop. You could operate it with a lever with your feet, and it would go and it'd scoop up some dirt, and you could turn it, and it would put it in a little dump truck.
Oh, that's cool.
So I really liked that. Brian didn't want it at all. He said, I don't want to play with that thing. And I played with it for days. And then one big Christmas was really good for me. I got shotguns. Cap guns. Toy cap guns.
Right.
Because I'd seen them in the movies, the Roy Rogers movies.
Absolutely. Yes.
Dale Evans, and we had our little cap guns, and it was so important to have those cap guns.
It was a big thing then.
It was a big thing then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, we'd dress up in Western clothes. And yeah, but it was quiet, it was pretty quiet.
Sounds like you were busy, and actually it sounds like it was a wonderful childhood.
It was a good childhood. I feel like this is my, if I have a spirit someplace, it's here, So.
As Tony says, there's something special about this place.
Yes.
And he says that to this day, it's
Yeah.
a community of family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much
We
nicer.
took care of each other. We did. We had to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mom was a nurse, and she sewed people up literally on the kitchen table.
Did she really?
She did. I told somebody, maybe you, about Dad's ear
No.
being cut off.
No.
Well, he was, at that time mine and mill superintendent, but he would get in, he worked with the guys. He worked as hard as the guys that he hired. And so he was friends with them. And after work, one time they got into a play fight. Because they were just like a play boxing thing. And my dad was little. He was only 5'5", just a tiny little thing.
Huh.
But he got into this little play fight. Well, somehow during the fight, he fell against the side of either the cookhouse or the boarding house, somewhere in there. And it was corrugated tin, of course. And it cut his ear off.
Oh.
Well, they brought him down to Mom, with the ear. And she sat him on the kitchen table. She poured iodine on that. She sewed his ear back on. And it grew, and it was just fine.
Wow.
So that's the gory story.
That's amazing. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there were a lot of accidents, with people here, but Mom stitched up a lot of people. So have Brian tell you the story about Betty.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will. I'm going to do that.
Okay.
And I was trying to think what else I was going to ask you. Where was the bunkhouse?
Well, yeah, it was just up by the mine. Dad
It
built
was by
this.
the mine.
It was, yeah, I can remember. Well, first we go up the road and off to the left, they had like bins where the trucks came. He had old Jimmy trucks from the war that
Okay.
he'd gotten somehow. And those Jimmy trucks would come in with the ore from the mine and pour it into this thing that had chutes on it. Well, from the chutes, that would go into the trucks. I don't know, something happened in the chutes. And I don't know
Okay.
how the process was, but the mill was a little bit farther up. There was, the mill was several layers. It was like 10, as I can remember. I sat there and watched my dad a lot because they used the cyanide they had barrels of cyanide crystals, blue crystals. He'd say, don't touch those are poison. But
Right.
it was a leach process of somehow a flotation process. The belt would come by and had an ore on the belt. It was a moving belt, and he said I could take pieces off that. So of course
Okay.
I'd take the prettiest piece I could find off that belt,
Right.
that I could lift, and take that home.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, but the mill was there, and then there was tailings just down somewhere off to the right of that. I remember that there was tailings that kind of went down, and there were tailings ponds, which I used to play in, believe it or not. I made ceramics. I made a little bear,
Ah,
and I still have it, that I made out of the tailings. My mom had a ceramic business later and fired it for me
oh, wow.
many years later. And but there was a bunkhouse there somewhere between, I remember the bunkhouse, and there was tailings not too far from that, because I remember Dad took pictures of the bears up there from right outside the bunkhouse. The bears would get into these Hercules powder boxes that were stacked, empty ones that were stacked outside somewhere, the
Right.
dynamite boxes. They would get in them, the little bears would get in them and slide down the tailings.
Really?
Yeah, and he took pictures of that.
Oh, for heaven's
So-
sakes, that's strange, isn't it?
Yes, they were fun. They just
Yeah.
played. They were
They were
playing.
playing.
Yeah. And so every time they stacked the boxes out there, the bears would do it again.
Oh, how funny is that? They're not dumb.
They weren't dumb. No. I went up there a lot with my dad. I went up a lot.
You have a remarkable memory of all that.
Oh, it meant a lot to me.
Uh-huh.
It did. And I can remember one time of him taking me up there somewhere and serving a mine that he said, wait under this pine tree and I'll be out. And it was a long time. It started to snow. And, snow came fast. And it started piling up. And I was down in the well by the tree. And I remember, I hope he comes soon. And I think I was up there like all day. It was a long time. And somehow I remember of us trudging home and couldn't get all the way home and had to walk part of the way. And,
Wow.
but we made it home. And my mother was hysterical. So,
I imagine so.
yeah. Yeah, but he was always exploring, always trying for new places for gold and lead and zinc and silver. I mean, all those, mined for everything, of course.
Right.
But there was a big market for zinc then.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and copper, of course. He worked in a lot of different copper mines,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
So,
I never thought about the zinc.
yeah, we had a lot of it up here.
Oh.
Yeah. Big piles. I remember the big piles of zinc
Oh, for
outside the mill. Yeah,
heaven. Interesting.
yeah. So,
Well,
those are childhood memories.
I think they're pretty neat ones.
Oh, thanks.
Now, there used to be, I believe there was a Catholic church and a boarding house on Main Street here in town.
I didn't go, so I don't know. I don't remember any churches in town. 'Cause all I remember from childhood is I don't think there were any churches. But there may have been, but we didn't go, maybe. But I remember a Bible school that came up in the summertime. There was like a week of Bible school in the summer, and it was held in the schoolhouse.
Okay.
And I just remember that, vaguely. I don't even remember the lessons, but they had kind of like a felt board, and they would kind of put pictures up with Joseph and his colorful coat, things that would grab kids' attention,
Sure, sure.
So,
Well, like Tony has said, the school was always the hub of the
it was
community.
the hub, yeah, but I don't remember any churches up here. And there may have been, and maybe we just didn't go, I just don't know.
I'm not exactly sure that it burned down. I know there was a fire on Main Street, and the church, and there was a boarding house, and those two burned down, where the fire station now is.
Okay.
But it might have been, I'd have to find out when.
Yeah.
Oh, and was the apple tree in front of the store when you were?
I don't remember the apple tree in front of the store, but
Okay.
there may have been. There was a hitching post in front of the store. I do remember that.
Right.
And where that road goes off to the left of the store now, it used to be just a trail. There wasn't a road there. I remember going up that trail, and one day just exploring it, and I was riding donkeys, of course, all the time. And so I went up there and I met this old prospector coming down, and he was laden and showed me the gold that he had.
Wow.
And it was coming down from that trail. It was quite a ways up that trail. And he had a donkey, and he was leading the donkey because he had all the gold on either side. I think he had a
Okay.
mule too. I mean, because one was bigger than the other. He had two. So apparently one he'd been riding, but he was leading. He was on foot. I remember that.
Wow.
And showing me the gold,
Isn't
which
that
really
something?
impressed me,
Well, that would.
And of course, all the trails that I would go around as a kid, and I'd see the claims, which were then stones that were put together into a pyramid,
Right,
and it would have some name inside of somebody's claim.
right.
Dad would always say, don't touch those because they've got somebody's name in there that's their claim.
That was a big thing. I mean,
That was a big thing. He said,
today it still is.
you don't touch those things.
You go out there and
Yeah.
right. Oh, for heaven's
Yeah.
sakes! Sounds like you had a wonderful childhood
Yeah,
here.
I did, and I played in the old mill across the street, Yeah.
And that was I've only seen the wall there. That's
Yeah,
still
it
there.
had basically more foundation there than it does today when I was here. I mean, it really had shapes to rooms in it and some equipment still laying around,
Right.
in it. But it was a wonderful playground. And the guy that lived at the end of our driveway had a little tiny trailer house. And he'd been hurt in the mine and was recovering. And he hired me, as a little kid, to go over to the mill and knock the rust off the nails that I found over there.
Really?
Yeah, and put them in a Folgers coffee can. And he would pay me, I can remember, this was like a penny or something for every coffee can. Whether it was nails or rust, I can't remember, but he'd give me a penny every time I got this coffee can full.
Oh my!
It was a big old square head nails, flat head nails,
Exactly.
Big ones, big nails, and I'd sit there with a rock and knocking the rust off from them.
You were pretty enterprising.
Well, I think he just offered it to me, because I was probably pestering him. He was probably trying to get me out of his hair, go do something, leave me alone.
She was a busy one up here.
Yeah. Well, I rode the horse, and I had a Schwinn bicycle, which was a big deal later, By the time I was 10, I had a Schwinn bicycle. Boy, I rode that thing everywhere, and I rode right down from the house where we lived, the tin house. I rode up this road, and Dad clocked me at 35 miles an hour.
Oh,
Came behind me. So I was trucking as a little
yeah,
kid.
you were. No helmet either.
No helmet either, no. Yeah,
Oh, that's
so
funny.
I think that's about all I can remember at this point.
Well,
But you can
we're
ask
gonna
me
be in
questions.
touch because I
Good.
still will have more questions, I'm sure.
Okay, well, thank
And
you.
I really appreciate you telling me
Oh, you're
stories. They're
so welcome.
wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's so nice to meet you.
Yes,
Thank you, because it's wonderful. They're just my memories that are so precious to me.
I think it's wonderful that you were able to come back.
And I tell them to my children now. So I had 4 girls, and I tell them about my childhood.
Oh, I'm sure. So you have 4 girls?
I have 4 girls, and one is no longer with us. She died when she was 53, but
Oh,
she had
that's hard.
hepatitis C that she'd gotten from a blood transfusion when her child was born. So I've lost one, but I have 3 still living and 12 living grandchildren and 6 living great-grandchildren.
That's very cool. You have a nice family.
I have a good family, yeah.
So you have one in Connecticut?
Well, she's the one that died, but I took
Oh,
care of her
okay.
for 10 years before she died.
Oh, okay.
And I have one,
Okay.
my oldest girl's 61, and she lives in Tacoma, between Tacoma and Puyallup. And she lives in a over 55
Isn't
place.
that awful?
When our kids are saying that they're...
Yes.
And then my next one, let's see, she's the chef, and she lives in Seattle right now. And she's
Okay.
working at the Women's University Club now, so she's a chef there. She's getting close to retirement too. And then I have one that lives in Longview, Washington now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're all up there in your area?
They're in my area, so I'm kind of close to the kids.
That's nice.
And I'm there every week. I work. I'm working in an art gallery.
Oh, you do?
Uh-huh. And I did go to the University of Washington and have a degree in art history, so, and also a degree in fine arts, but it was not digital, film, photography. And so,
I know.
you know, people have just come to me and offered me jobs, and I've been very lucky in my life. And I've always, my husband died in 1989.
Okay.
But I graduated as an older person in 1986. I went to school with my daughter. Graduated
for
from the
you.
University of Washington.
So
So
exciting. I mean, that's wonderful.
So, yeah. So then after that, I just went to work for frame shops, and I became a framer for 20 years, you know, for picture framing. And I went to Hawaii and had a gallery in Hawaii. Was
Oh,
a
for
framer.
heaven's sakes.
Stone's Gallery was the name on Kauai.
Okay.
On Kukui Nut Grove.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So I love Hawaii still. My daughter's going to take me next month to go
Good.
back and visit.
Good.
And so good memories and good friends in Hawaii. And I've just worked many places, and now in this little town. I live in Randall, but I work in Morton. It's
Okay.
called the Barbara Clevenger Johnson Gallery. It's a memorial gallery for Barbara Johnson. She died, but she was raised in Morton, and her husband donated the money for us to build a gallery. It's a non-profit gallery. So I've represented in the last 14 years over 200 artists.
Wow.
And it's small, but you know, we've had a steady flow of artists through. We have a nice little exhibit, and I love working there.
That's so neat.
And I love the people I meet. So
That's neat.
yeah.
That's not a job. That's just
It's
a great
just
joy.
fun because you're
Yep.
giving people a place to show their art, you know,
Exactly.
and they're making some money from it.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's just been fun for me. And we have a theater there, and it's been wonderful. We've got a state of the art. We converted the old Roxy Theater. My son-in-law worked on it 6 years and became president of a nonprofit theater group.
Okay.
And we have first-run movies, digital projector. We paid for all that out of
Wow.
our little town. We came up with $42,000, and Digital or Dark matched us $42,000 to get the projector.
That's
So we
wonderful.
got that up. We have that. We have an adult theater, which just is wonderful. We have a children's theater that my daughter started and ran for 15 years,
Oh,
and she's
for
now in
heaven's sakes.
Longview. But she started the first children's theater there, and it's ongoing now. Other people have taken it over now and are running it. But it gave the kids a place because there was nothing for the kids to do there. So it
Right.
gave them something to do. And she could teach singing and dancing. And and got these wonderful plays in for the kids. So,
That
and the
is
whole
very
thing,
cool.
it just packs the theater.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so we're just doing a lot of fun things.
I guess you are.
Yeah,
It sounds like it's a really neat place to live
Yeah.
also.
it is. It's a nice place. It's like this, but I miss the pines here. I miss the smell. We have fir trees and Douglas fir trees,
Right.
mostly fir trees.
Okay.
Yeah, we have some pines. I have some pines. I have some short pines that grew in my yard.
Right.
But I miss the ponderosa.
Do you
I
really?
miss the smell so much. Yes, and I miss the granite.
Okay.
The granite rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different.
It is. It is.
Yep.
It's amazing how every area is so different.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that area up there I always think of as really green and lush and pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's neat in its own way. It's, yeah, very different.
Mhm.
But, yeah.
But we have 9 months of rain there.
Yes,
this
you
is
do have that.
You know,
That's why it's green and lush.
that exactly. So there you go.
My husband reminds me that, and we know when the grandkids come and visit and they're all the color of a sheet.
Exactly.
It's
There's no sun. So I stand every day in the summer out there. Now I have a nice little house. I bought a little, in 1999, I bought a little fixer-upper and fixed it up. And now it needs it again. You know, it's been 20 years, so, you know.
It's a
And I have a
non-ending.
garden, and that gives great joy to me to work in the garden.
Oh, that's nice.
I have apple trees too, and
Okay.
cherry trees, and pear trees, and, you know, just nice. It's nice.
You have a great life.
I have a good life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a wonderful brother who brought me up here. So I think it's his turn.
I think he better come and
You
sit
better
down.
get
and
over here. I'm going to leave. You're going to sit.
Bye. It's his turn in the hot seat. He's like, all right, what am I in for here?
Well, this won't take us long because when I was here, I left when I was 4 years old.
You were young.
So my memories are basically from age 2 to age 4 with Grand King. I was very impressed with being bundled up in a snowsuit most of the year, playing in snow. That's when I had big memories of sledding was fun, and just sliding down hills in a snowsuit was fun.
Uh-huh. I bet it was.
I was there. I have some memories of the Silverman house and the Silverman maids. I remember them making a big fuss over me and spoiling me. They were some of the happiest women on the face of the planet. They just always smiling, always laughing. And when I'd go over to Silverman's, they'd spoil me and make a fuss. Mrs. Silverman had an old Victrola record player, one of those that you crank it up and then set the needle down, and it had the big horn on the top of it that was connected to the needle, and I was very impressed with that. And she had 78 RPM records of Heifetz and of string quartets and string sextets, Schubert, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky. I remember a lot of, just hearing a lot of music on that old 78 RPM record player they had over there. And before we left town, I was old enough to, whereas they would permit me to wind it up and put a platter on the turntable and set the needle in place and then turn that on and to actually use that. So that was a fun thing for a little kid to
I
be
bet it
able.
was.
And Mrs. Silverman would encourage me to pick out a record, and it was probably those records that gave me my first impression of music.
So what do you do for music now?
So
What is your...
I'm a violinist.
Ah, wonderful.
You know, I had in my mind, I had a real good idea of what music was made out of from those 78s.
Huh.
And when we moved, we left. We lived in southern Utah for a while, and I took piano lessons from a polygamist lady.
Oh, really?
And she was a lot of fun. Her name was Birdie Covington. probably short for Bertha. But Birdie, all of Birdie's kids had bird names. There was Robin and Jay and Sparrow
Really?
and Lark, and Mr. Covington would come about once a year just and hang around at the house just long enough to encourage another fledgling.
That is amazing.
But memories from here, I mean, that was about it from Crown King, because I was such a little kid. I remember the pine needles. I remember sliding down a hill into the back of the house and hitting the corrugated tin roof that had been out in the sun all day and hitting it with my shoulder. And the reason I remember that is because I've got a scar of the shape of that corrugated roof on my arm that reminds me of that day.
Your memory of Crown King.
Yeah. I remember that electric train set, of course. That was a big hit that particular Christmas.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I
Old
bet.
Lionel had the 3 tracks, the hot track in the middle.
Oh, okay, that's really neat.
Yeah, that was the system back in the 40s. And that Christmas tree, we actually had electric lights. They were the old big fat bulbs that we hung on that Christmas tree.
Yep.
And so we had a star that we had on the top of our Christmas tree instead of an angel.
Okay.
And we always figured there were some people that had angels and some people that had stars, and we were star people.
There you go.
I don't remember much being made out of. I think sometimes there would be an Easter egg hunt if it
Okay.
wasn't all snowy.
I think there was more snow back then
Yeah.
than there is now.
Oh, that I think there was one year where it was just an incredible amount of snow. Snow up over your shoulders.
That's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, you couldn't get in or out of town. The roads would be closed for one reason or another, either a landslide or a flood or a snowstorm. So everybody up here got to be real self-sufficient, and everybody took care of each other. Now, Bonnie reminds me of that story about Betty Anderson. And the way I had that story is that Betty had burglars. And when she'd had just the right amount of whiskey, she'd start to see these burglars coming and bothering her at the house. She'd hear them knocking on the windows. And so Betty kept a .30-06 loaded just so she could take care of herself in case of these burglars. And it was a winter night. It was snowy or rainy or both, cold as hell. Betty appeared at the doorstep, and I remember hearing her bawl. She said, "Harris, I shot myself in the foot."
Oh no.
And so got her inside, and you took her boot off. There was a big bullet hole in her boot where she'd accidentally hit the trigger on that .30-06. And they pulled the boot off, and there was a big hole in the sock, and we pulled her sock off, and that bullet had gone right clean between her big toe and the toe next to it, with just a little bit of red rash.
Oh wow.
But the flesh wasn't even broken. There wasn't any blood.
Well,
It was
that
the
was
damnedest
lucky.
thing. But that bullet went through the top of her boot and through the toes and out through the bottom of the boot. And there you could just look at it and see the holes from the top to the bottom. And other things I remember were the damn scorpions and centipedes. I mean, when you got up in the morning, you had to shake out your shoes. For sure, because the scorpions would crawl in there. They just loved to be in a shoe. And I remember a fairly dramatic evening where a centipede had gotten in the wall, between the wallpaper and the wall, and that had to be, and it was a centipede about that long, big around as your thumb, had the claws, and the only way you could kill the damn things was to grab them with a pair of tongs and throw them in a pan of boiling water. I remember my mom hitting one with a baseball bat once, and it ran off in 2 directions. And they were big. They were horrible. There was one old miner that had a whole bunch of scars, just perfect little holes lined down his arms in 2 rows. From the word was that if a centipede got on you and it was walking in one direction, you'd brush it off in that direction. Because if it was walking this way and you brushed it this way, then it'd just automatically clamp down, and that's what happened to that fella.
Really?
And every one of what happens is that they're not poisonous per se, but the dirt and filth that they carry on those those claw legs, they just when they clamp down, each one of those places where they cut into you, they plant the germs that they've been walking around in.
Oh, for heaven's
And so it
sake.
gets infected, and it makes a hell of a scar.
Be nasty.
Yeah, impossible to clean it out. Anyway, that old fella had quite a trophy on his arm to impress us young kids with.
I guess.
I think it might have been Buzzy Eldridge that knew how to put his hand down such that a scorpion could crawl right up on the palm of his hand, and he could flip it at you like that and make you jump.
Really?
It was one of those boys. I don't remember exactly which.
They tease you with that?
Well, bigger boys automatically bully little boys. That's part of the way the world works.
I think so.
So that's the memories from here are good memories. And memories of the pines, like Bonnie says, the smell of the pines is something real special.
Yep. Yep.
I remembered a lot of the kinds of flies that get on the back of your neck and take out a chunk of flesh the size of a BB. Didn't encounter any of those today, but it seems to me that there were horseflies there that were merciless.
Once in a while, we'll get them. Come in cycles, I think.
And then there was something I remembered in these hills that I didn't hear. But you'd walk around out in the hills and you hear this hoot of a mourning dove or an owl, just a hoot out in the hoo-wee-oo.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard that since I've been up here, but they were common back then.
Yes, we still get the doves.
You still get the doves.
Yeah. And there are owls.
There are some owl hoots.
I don't see them very often. I'm not lucky. I love to see them, but yeah. But it just depends where you're at, I guess. Where the doves are hanging out that year, I don't know. But we do still get those. So do you have memories of any of the old miners or anything like that?
I really don't. I was a kid and they were adults.
Yeah.
And I just tried to keep out from underfoot.
Yeah.
I remember sometimes pit folks would come over and play bridge, and on those occasions there would always be Planters salted mixed nuts, which were a big treat. Those tinned cans of planted nuts. And sometimes there would be Kraft caramels, which in the individual cellophane wrappers were an awful big treat.
Exactly.
I remember the radio. I don't remember the war ending, but I remember Jack Benny show.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I remember Rochester.
That was actually a cool show.
Yeah. Jack Benny was clever, and then there was Amos and Andy, and Gunsmoke. I'll tell you what. Swear to God, the kid could not make a single sound in the house when Gunsmoke was on.
That was probably, I don't remember listening to it on the radio. I watched it on TV for years, of course, but...
Oh yeah, this was radio. There was...
Yeah.
But, I didn't care much about world events, so if Walter Winchell was on, I just pretty much tuned it out.
Right.
I did like hearing the music. Yeah.
So do you play violin professionally? And
Now I'm retired, but I used to play a lot. And now I've got a show. It lasts about an hour and a half. It's called 100 Years of Tango. And it's a survey of Argentine tango music and dance.
Okay.
And I've arranged all the music and choreographed. And we've got ensemble of dancers, and we've got some solo couple dancers. And we've got a narrator that tells about the story of the Argentine tango culture. which is pretty interesting development in the art world. It's a unique and special kind of music, and I've been studying it for, I guess, about 20 years.
Okay.
Before that, I had a Hungarian band and played. Music has opened doors for me all over the world, so I've been to South America and played music there, and been to Eastern Europe and played music there, all Poland, Hungary, Romania. Nice tour through Italy and Rome.
That's very cool.
And, went to Vienna, saw all the wonderful art museums in Vienna while we were there.
Oh yeah. That'd be
So
beautiful.
yeah, but the reason I got involved in the tango was I was just playing for a frenzy full of dancers in Romania. Big room, people just having the greatest time. And at some point I was playing and I thought, those guys are having fun. So, got that. I just made the decision. I thought, when I get back to the States and sober up, heck, which took about 6 months, I'm going to get involved in some sort of dancing that doesn't have a fiddle under my chin. And so I looked around and I tried some swing dancing and West Coast swing and jitterbug and Lindy Hop, and everybody was half my age or less, and that wasn't working out. So I found the tango club that had a little advertisement, and I went over to the ballet school where the tango was going to be that evening, and everything was closed, lights were out, but the doors were unlocked, and I walked in, and I walked down a couple of dark halls into a room where I could hear music, and I pushed the door open, and there were two ladies sitting on folding chairs listening to tango music, and when I appeared at the door, they kind of looked over and, oh man. And they made me feel really welcome.
I bet they did.
And so I started dancing the tango, and just,
cool.
you having the music to dance to, and then, I guess that lasted about 4 years, and then a fellow moved from Argentina to Utah that was a bandoneon player, which the bandoneon is one of the main tango instruments, and he's a real authority. And he wanted to start performing, and he needed a violinist, and so he recruited me, and I couldn't pass up the chance, although it took me off the dance floor away from the tango ladies.
Put you back.
Yeah, back to that, so now, but he was such a great mentor, such an authority on the authentic culture that I had to study with him, and I got hooked into it and made a real study of it, and went down to Buenos Aires and did the whole pilgrimage.
Okay.
And came back with well, now I'm just clomping around with a foot in each bucket. Sometimes I play the violin, sometimes I dance.
It's kind of nice,
But
though.
I've got a nice band to work with. I've got a nice community of dancers to work with.
Okay.
We'll put on a show once in a while. It's
When
a
do
nice
you do
show.
that?
Pardon? Well, we had a place downtown called the Gallivan Center, which would seat about 400.
Uh-huh.
And the next one is the Covey Center at Provo, and that'll seat about 700.
Okay.
And then we've got one out in West Jordan, Utah. They're called the Viridian Center, and that'll seat about 700.
Okay.
It'll be in the winter, so it's inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the lineup of shows for the tango show.
Right.
I also play in chamber orchestras. There's a Paradigm Chamber Orchestra that I perform with.
Okay.
And I play in a symphony orchestra, the Sandy Symphony Orchestra, which is full on, brass, woodwinds, percussion, the whole kit and caboodle. I play viola in that.
Oh,
And that's rewarding. That's a lot of fun to stick with it. It keeps me involved with the classical end of music.
exactly.
I picked up the violin in Cripple Creek, or we were living in Cripple Creek, or Victor actually, near the
Okay.
Carlton Mill. There was the big gold mill there
Uh-huh.
between Victor and Cripple Creek, and my dad was running that. And we'd go down to Colorado Springs for provisions, and on one of those trips, when Dad was in getting a haircut, and I went into the music store next door and I picked up a violin and messed around with it till I had a couple of tunes I could play, you know, like a kid with a toy. And he came out and we had money. And he said, well, just buy the damn thing. We bought a book for 50 cents. Said, teach yourself to play the violin. And then we went back up to camp, and that's what I did. And by the time we got to Salt Lake City, and Dad was working with the Bureau of Mines on the university campus, it was time to start summer school, and they put me in the summer school program, and the teacher says, I can't do anything with you.
Yeah.
And so they found a professor at the university that was willing to take me on, and he insisted on having a lesson every morning of the week, Monday through Friday.
Oh, wow.
And in trade for those lessons, I had to play in his orchestras on the university campus, which I just loved because I didn't like city schools.
Right.
I didn't like the city, and I didn't like city schools at all. There were, you know, I looked at it as the Jets and the rebels, you know, and I didn't want to be anywhere around them. So getting out of school early to go up and be on the university campus worked really well for me. So I played in a couple orchestras there.
Okay.
And I guess when I was about 14, I started writing out quartet music that I found at the city library and at the university library, and rounded up some of the college girls. They were old enough to drive, and we started playing string quartets at weddings and receptions and art openings, and pretty much anybody that had cough up a couple of $100 for kids to play quartet music.
Oh, you did
And
from very
so,
young age. Very young.
Yeah, I got my first tux when I was 15.
There you go.
And of course, a lot of that was just for the fun of riding around in cars with college girls.
Yeah, that's a little benefit of it, but
But yeah, the quartet years were good, and playing string quartets was a real kind of a lucrative activity for a kid.
yeah.
You know, it wasn't every kid that could drum up $75 on a Friday evening.
No, not very many. Well,
So that's kind of how the music went. Of course, as I got older, then I just went right through from middle school, junior high school, we called it then.
yeah.
I went from junior high school to high school, and still playing in the university orchestras. And then when I graduated from high school, I just went straight to the university
Okay.
and kept on playing in the orchestras and got a bachelor's out of that.
That's excellent.
I tried to teach public school for a few years, and well, it didn't really take well. I wasn't a public school teacher personality.
It's not an easy.
No, it just,
No.
I liked the kids, I liked teaching, but the squabbles between the faculty and the administration and half of the families in town just made life worse. And quite frankly, I never liked the environment of a public school.
Right.
Just being, you know, in that space, in that system, with that regimen.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So I went back to the university. I'm retired now. I'm perfectly happy to just pick my jobs where I want them.
Do what you like to do.
Yeah.
That's very cool. You know, it kind of amazes me also about this place, because we don't really have a lot of music teaching here. You know, it's last year we did have the teacher's husband volunteered, went every day and taught the kids. We had 11 kids at the school, and he spent every day there for a little while with the kids, and they could all play instruments when they were at the end of the year. It was really neat. But how many people have gone on? One of the Moores, Arlen, she was a conductor for the Metropolitan Opera.
Wow.
Really? Oh my gosh.
There's
we gotta
some
get
work
you
there,
familiar
yeah.
with her.
Yeah.
You're probably about the same age, maybe.
Yeah,
'Cause
she
she was younger.
was younger.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, she would have been a little older than you, maybe. But
Oh,
see,
yeah.
I didn't know her. She was a baby then, when I was
yeah.
6 or 7. you know.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, even if she wasn't,
probably
may not
was.
even been born. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to think what year she went to school there. But she and her brother went on to be the geologist,
Yes.
Buzzy.
Right.
But then there's several other musicians that have come out of here, and it's just kind of surprising. Our librarian, Sue, now, her son actually went to school here, and he now works in L.A., in Hollywood.
Mhm.
He writes for movies and ads and that kind of thing.
Right.
But, so yeah, for a tiny little base, it just surprises me how much music is involved here.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Isn't it
interesting.
amazing?
And of course, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tony loves to play, and his son Louis, he plays. And
Good.
so it's really
The
kind
fellow
of
with
neat.
the prospect.
Oh, yes,
he
yes.
plays.
Yep, he plays. So music and mining seems to kind of,
Go together.
The theme there, I don't know why.
yeah, seems to be. Maybe the entertainment that goes along with the hard work of the mining.
It's a
Kinda.
release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is so neat. I really appreciate your stories.
Thank you.